Hey, so I want you to meet somebody. His name is Victor Vlam.
Hey, Flora, it's Victor.
So Victor's a Dutch journalist covering U.S. politics, but he also has this side hobby, that he's just straightforwardly super proud of.
I first did it anonymously because I was sort of ashamed for it. But after a while, I said to myself, why in heaven's name should I be ashamed of this?
That interest, that Victor should absolutely not be ashamed of, is television news music. Like the themes that TV news stations play.
I've been recording television music from when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember my parents giving me a recording device, one of those red recording machines just, made for kids. And I think most people recorded probably themselves singing or whatever. But I actually used it to record television theme songs at the time.
What did your parents think?
I think they probably thought it was incredibly weird, but they certainly did not say so. They were actually very supportive.
Okay, so that childhood interest turned into a blog that he has run for the last 15 years. It tracks the latest fashions in news music, drawing from this library that he has been collecting since age 4.
And I literally have like 50,000 hours of news music on a hard drive stored in my house.
50,000 hours.
Yes. It's an incredible amount. And, I just put a lot of that stuff on my iPhone, for example. And when I go out for a run, I listen to some news theme music.
Okay, I need to know more about this. Do you have a running playlist?
I do, actually, yeah.
Do you have it? Like, do you have your phone? Can you go to it and read me some of the songs?
Yeah, sure. When I ran a marathon a couple of years ago, I just actually thought of a good playlist. I'm actually searching for it now. Yeah, it actually starts with the World News Tonight theme from 2012, which is by Hans Zimmer. And I thought it was a very dramatic theme.
The first song on your playlist for your marathon run was the 2012 World News Tonight theme song.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, what came next?
Some local news themes came next. And then at the point at which I plan to be at around a quarter of the way through, I have The Mission, which is the NBC News theme. So I have actually a couple of NBC News themes up there from Nightly News, from Meet the Press. And let's see, there's some CBS stuff as well, some locals.
Wait.
There's a... Yes?
Victor, this is amazing. This is really surprising. You are the only person I would venture in the world to run a marathon to news music.
Yes, I would bet that's probably true, yes.
All right. So here's the thing, Victor. Your love for news music makes me think I am really not getting it. Like, there's something to news music that I am not seeing.
I think it's sort of interesting. I'm not exactly. Sometimes people ask me, like, what do you think is interesting about that? And to be honest with you, I have no idea what I think is interesting about it.
Okay, Victor may not know what makes it interesting to him, but he does know how it makes him feel.
I think because the events of the news are, so incredibly important and they shape our lives. For example, the Berlin Wall coming down, that was a very vivid memory I have from my childhood. And I think some of the news music from that time that I listen to today, it sort of brings you back to a safe, comfortable childhood when things were feeling much more innocent than they are today. Or that's sort of the feeling that I think it gives you.
I mean, that's kind of amazing, because think about what news music has to overcome to create any positive feelings at all right now.
North Korea has produced a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can fit inside its...
Hundreds of thousands of Muslim Rohingya have been forced from their homes in Myanmar.
Adults finds us more divided than ever.
Let's talk about the deaths.
From the flames in Santa Rosa.
The deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history has happened at an outdoor country music festival on the Las Vegas Strip.
But despite so much bad news music is giving Victor a feeling of safety. And on top of that, it propelled him through 26 grueling miles. How is it doing that?
I can help you answer that question.
I've got producer Gofen Putumbwele with me. Gofen is a music nerd and introduced me to Victor.
Yeah, so to figure out the answer to this question, I called up a bunch of composers from all over the world because news music is a global genre. And let me introduce you to them. We have Irad Eshel.
I live in Tel Aviv, Israel.
And Adarsh Totetodi.
I'm a music producer with New Delhi Television in India.
We've got David Lowe.
I put the news theme together for the BBC.
And Matt Kaczynski, who composed Good Morning America's theme.
Hi, how are you doing?
Here are 3 things the composers try to do with their news themes. So first, news themes often start with a bang.
With all my news themes, I try to grab onto the viewer right out of the gate. Really pull them in from passive listening to active listening through some sort of quick, intense build marking the show open and ID.
And you can hear it in Irad's theme for News 10 in Israel as well. So that's a way of grabbing people, right? The second thing the composers pointed out is this steady beat.
If you see any news music, the rhythm, the groove section is very constant.
One beat you'll hear a lot is called 4 on the Floor.
That is like toom, 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 toom.
So 4 on the Floor isn't a ton of music, but in news music, it gives you this feeling of reliability and stability.
It never stops. It's like a grid that you can't run away from.
Okay, this is the last thing, and this is actually pretty subtle, but composers also want to convey that even if the news is tense and urgent, things are also under control. So listen for how David uses the chords to do this in the BBC theme. David's moving from a minor chord to a major chord, which feels a lot more settled.
What it sort of says is the news is coming in, it's all a bit uncertain, it's all a bit unstable, it's almost making us a bit worried. But then we're processing it and bringing it to you in a very safe, authoritative way.
Okay, so let me see if I got this. News music kickstarts you with a big build. It has a driving beat that creates this feeling of steadiness, and it makes you feel like even in tense, hard moments, things will be fine.
Yep.
Got it. Thanks, Gofen. So it makes total sense that Victor would be propelled by news music and get a feeling of safety from it because it's designed to do exactly those things. But here's the deal. Victor appreciates news music on this higher level, too.
It's one of the most difficult pieces of music to create.
Just think about this for a second. So news themes have to work with every headline, from cat video memes to disasters.
The news is literally different every single night, and it's played multiple times a day for sometimes many, many years. It needs to hold up very well.
Do you think it's the most heard music in the world?
I would actually not be surprised if that were the case.
The most heard music in the world that we also may think about the least. After the break, if news music is propelling Victor through marathons, what's it doing to the rest of us?
You can't see it, you can't touch it, and yet it's there working. And it's working with the images to convince us of something.
Those images and sounds would sell not only the war coverage that you were watching, but also in a particularly insidious way, sell the war.
This episode of Every Little Thing is brought to you by WordPress.com. WordPress makes it easy to purchase domains and build a website or personal blog. The Gimlet Media website was actually created using WordPress. You don't need any experience setting up your website. WordPress guides you through the process from start to finish. They take care of the technical aspects, so it's easy just to get your site up and running. If you have any questions at all, you can get in touch with their customer support team. They're available to help 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Plans start at $4 per month, and all WordPress plans include a custom domain name for the life of the plan. Go to wordpress.com/ELT to get 15% off your website today. That's wordpress.com/ELT. This episode of Every Little Thing is brought to you by Why We Eat What We Eat, a new podcast from Blue Apron and Gimlet Creative. It's a show for people who eat, so that covers everybody, right? On the show, the host, Kathy Irway, investigates the unseen forces that shape our eating habits. This week, potlucks. Where do they come from? I've always wondered why they're called potlucks, and you will find out on the show. Kathy will tell you. You'll also find out about a potluck staple that comes from the unofficial capital of potlucks, the state of Minnesota. Have you heard of the hot dish?
It's got some kind of protein, either chicken or ground beef or something like that. And then there's something that, makes it mushy. Cream of mushroom or cream of chicken or some kind of soup, Sometimes there's some kind of cheese that goes in with it, too.
Get your casserole dishes ready. Why We Eat What We Eat is out now on Apple Podcasts, or check it out at whyweeat.show. I think it's safe to say that it's a weird time for news.
The media in general, it's focused on conflict.
People have been making a living off of creating fake news.
You are fake news.
We're so overloaded from information.
Who gets to shout the loudest becomes a standard for news practice.
Fake news, fake news, information overload, the false urgency of the 24-hour news cycle. There are a lot of threads to scrutinize about the media right now. And I know news music isn't usually at the top of that heap of concerns, but the story of how news music came to be tells us a lot about how the TV news industry as a whole developed.
Before the advent of television, people got their news in moving images through newsreels.
Musicologist James DeVille is going to give us some high points of this history, starting with a time when people would get their news in movie theaters.
Originally, during the era of silent film, they would have live music accompanying the newsreel that was shown in the theater.
So early news music was very classy. And by the way, just as a fun aside, there were actually newsreel theaters that looped the news constantly. You would just go into a movie theater and watch the news. Okay, anyway, moving forward.
Television becomes a technology in the late 40s.
And with TV comes TV news.
Then comes Walter Cronkite and CBS. And in September 1963, they moved to a half-hour format.
And this is a big moment. This is the birth of the evening news format as we know it. And around this time, you also start to hear the first TV news themes. So CBS Evening News has a theme, but they don't go with music.
It was the teletype.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
There was no nonsense. There was no sense of entertainment.
In Washington, Fred P. Graham in Atlanta, Peter Kalischer.
NBC's evening news show at the time, the Huntley-Brinkley Report.
Here is the news, reported by Chet Huntley and David Brinkley.
It has a theme, too, for the credits, and they go with Beethoven.
The Ninth Symphony, which I think gives them a sense of authority. And so you begin to get then branding of the news product in the late 60s.
Are they trying to compete with Cronkite in some way? I mean, or does anyone talk about this explicitly as we need a sonic brand?
There is some documentation about that. I mean, let's face it, these networks are in competition with each other for audience as they are even today.
Okay, so throughout the 70s, networks continue to experiment with news music. And then in the 1980s, NBC takes it to the next level.
You find NBC commissioning John Williams to write music for its newscast.
Yes, the famous film composer, John Williams, the person who did Star Wars and Jaws and E.T., big Spielberg collaborator. And Victor says this is like a masterpiece of news music.
It was recorded by a 100-piece orchestra. It has been used for 30 years. I truly think it's one of the best pieces of news music.
This is an inflection point. Now, the news has a soundtrack.
We're going into a high concept notion of the news like Hollywood, like a Hollywood film. I guess I would call it the rise of the infotainment industry.
And this John Williams theme, it's just the beginning.
But really the thing that catapulted the idea of the news as entertainment, I hate to say it, but was the Persian Gulf War in 1990-91 and the rise of CNN as the network.
So CNN is born in 1980, but James says that the network really comes into its own with its Persian Gulf War coverage.
As the world watches CNN's coverage of the Gulf War, remember, CNN is the source for
And music is a part of that. With this war, we have CNN using special music, not just for its shows or network, but to help brand this big story of the day.
Iraq says yes to Soviet peace proposals and will withdraw from Kuwait.
They simply showed you a tank and had a kettle drum roll, and it was like the Beethoven Fifth. Bum, 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 bum.
CNN.
It's kind of the soundtrack of that war. I mean, that was just one detail, and the other networks found themselves with their news packages down.
We forget that television news is still television. And, their ratings go up substantially during moments of crisis and certainly international conflict when the U.S. is involved.
This is Deborah Jaramillo. She wrote a book about the cable news coverage of the war in Iraq. And basically her argument is that by 2003, cable news networks adopt lots of high-concept filmmaking techniques. From music to packaging to graphics, we are now a long way from those Cronkite teletype days.
Fox News commissioned a number of pieces of music that would accompany its various title sequences. The composer for that actually referred to it as Metallica rehearsing Wagner.
What?
So that gives you a sense of the aggressiveness of the original package. And Fox News wound up kind of toning it down so that it wasn't so rock and roll, but it was still pretty aggressive in terms of its excitement.
Other networks had special war themes too. Here's CBS's theme. Here's MSNBC and NBC's early war theme. Here's CNN's theme.
Certain sounds are being used for particular reasons. You hear a rapid snare drum. It communicates militarism, right? It's a march. It's a shortcut to communicating really complicated ideas. Nationalism is so loaded. If you have that musical shortcut, it can be communicated sonically. This was all part of their kind of larger war branding strategy.
I mean, even just the idea that there's a war branding strategy makes me uncomfortable.
As it should. Those images and sounds would sell not only the war coverage that you were watching, but also in a particularly insidious way, sell the war.
The composers we spoke with didn't talk about their craft in this way. For them, the challenge of the theme is more about creating this clear sonic brand for the network. And today, networks are using more music than ever. There are special cues for opening credits, closing credits, getting in and out of commercials, special reports, election coverage. And all that music, inevitably, is shaping the way that we interpret the information we're getting.
Music is the ultimate hidden persuader.
Like right now, we're trying to convince you that this is kind of ominous.
You can't see it, you can't touch it, and yet it's there working. And it's working with the images to convince us of something.
Unfortunately, on any given day, we have a disaster happening. So this is an important moment for comparative analysis of cable channels and how they're responding to disasters using music.
It hadn't occurred to me that we could have news without news music. It just felt like this inevitability until we started learning about it. So what does it mean that we do it this way?
That's a very good question. I think it means that we've become, to a certain extent, divorced from reality. If we were to see the bodies in Las Vegas or whatever, it would overwhelm us without some kind of, padding. It kind of mediates reality.
It takes us out of the reality of the moment. It makes it seem like we're watching a film.
Very true.
We're taught in this country not to think about television. We're taught, in fact, that television is where you go to turn off your brain. And, some people say, well, just turn off the TV. No, don't just turn off the TV. Actively study the TV.
So there are a lot of things to study about the TV and news in general right now. And in this context, news music might seem like this little thing. But as you know, little things can tell you about big things. You know what I mean? What's your closer? What was your closer tunes for, like mile, whatever, 2025?
I actually had that planned out very well. It's actually Wrecking Ball, Miley Cyrus.
Good choice.
It is, actually. It's really a great song, just to close.
You can find Victor's amazingly comprehensive blog at networknewsmusic.com.
Every Little Thing was made by Flora Lichtman, Catherine Wells, Gofen Putubuele, Christine Driscoll, and Devin Taylor, with help from Nicole Pasulka, Annette Heist, and Doug Barron. Dara Hirsch scored and mixed this episode. Don't hate on me. The show is over.
This week on Reply All, a bounty hunter chases a fugitive who hasn't been seen in 6 years.
The fact that someone is out there that killed my brother, knows they devastated a family, and does not even care. I want him caught.
The Skip Tracer. This week on Reply All.
Thanks to our sponsor, WordPress.com. WordPress makes it easy to purchase domains and build a website or personal blog. Plans start at just $4 per month. And all WordPress plans include a custom domain name for the life of the plan. Go to WordPress.com/ELT to get 15% off your website today. That's WordPress.com/ELT. Thanks to our sponsor, Why We Eat What We Eat, a new podcast from Blue Apron and Gimlet Creative. In this series, host Kathy Irway investigates the unseen forces that shape our eating habits. Subscribe to Why We Eat What We Eat now on Apple Podcasts or check it out at whyweeat.show.